We're going to dive into this straight away, and we're going to dive in the morning. Why diving in the morning? How would this make a difference in holding your breath longer underwater? Well, if you dive in the morning, it is easier to dive on an empty stomach. Now, I'm not saying that you should dive on an empty stomach all the time, because this is more like a personal preference. I like to dive with a little bit of food in my stomach, but not on specific disciplines, like, for instance, no fins. When I do no fins, I like to have food in me, in my stomach, because it demands too much. This discipline, no fins, demands too much of me. If I do a challenging no fins dive without having had breakfast, then yeah, that just doesn't feel right. And also I have to recover more. It just feels better. It's better for my body if I have a little bit of food in my stomach. But when I do, for instance, dynamic, then I prefer to do it without having breakfast. So let's say 9 o'clock in the morning, I do dynamic. Well, I would just wake up at 8 a.m., prepare myself, go to the school, do my thing in the pool, and then afterwards I will start eating. So this is a personal thing, but if you dive in the morning and you dive on an empty stomach, and that is what works best for you, then obviously you will be able to hold your breath longer. So for some people who haven't figured this out yet, you have to try this. Go a couple of times with having breakfast and go a couple of times without having breakfast. See what works best. If you are one of those people that doesn't tolerate too much food in the stomach before diving, then you will benefit a lot from diving on empty stomach, and you will see that your time underwater will be so much extended. Stretch 5 minutes before diving. Now, this is to be considered as a warm-up. So do not do like a whole extensive stretching routine before diving. Only 5 minutes. Do not pass 5 minutes, because I want it to be a warm-up. If you stretch too much before diving, then you're basically making yourself tired. You're already gonna feel fatigued. Your muscles are not gonna be that optimal anymore. So the whole idea of a warm-up is to warm up the body. It is not to do a workout already. So often I see that students misunderstand the concept of a warm-up. A warm-up is nothing more than just doing a couple of exercises to get you going, to get the blood flowing, to get used to maybe some breath holding, and that's it. Then you stop and you go diving. So 5 minutes of stretching might be a nice small morning routine right before diving, just to wake up your body and to prepare yourself physically and psychologically for your dive. Then you can also warm up your lungs. I would prefer doing this when I'm on the boat. So most people, when they dive, they have to take a boat to go a little deeper in the water, unless you're living in Panglao in the Philippines and you can just walk down the stairs and jump in the water and have like 50 meters in front of you. But those are exceptions. So most people have to take a boat to go free diving. So if you're on a boat, make good use of this time to warm up your lungs. In fact, you're not warming up your lungs, you are warming up your respiratory muscles, so the muscles around your lungs that are responsible for the in and exhalation, and you're also getting more used to the breath hold. So if you dive in the morning and you just woke up, you still have to get used to being awake and getting on with your day, right? So a breath hold might come a bit as a shock. So you have to get used to this. So if you're doing some small breathing techniques that involve like little breath holds, then you're warming yourself up. That's a good preparation for a dive. And me, I like to do like yogic breathing. I've made a couple of videos about yogic breathing, belly breathing, then intercostal muscle breathing, and then chest breathing. So 3-part breathing, 1, 2, 3. And I like to make the inhalation as long as possible, and then the exhalation also as long as possible. So I'm going to demonstrate this to you a little bit faster, because if not, it takes us too long. So it goes like this. And I do it longer than I demonstrated now. I'm not talking about the breathe up here. I am talking simply about doing some breathing exercises as a warm-up on the boat. I'm not talking about a warm-up in the water. I'm not talking about a breathe up. This is simply some pranayamas or breathing exercises, just to get you going, just to break that state of, oh, I just woke up, to, okay, now we're going to dive. So warm up your lungs, warm up your brain, warm up your body. on the boat, and that will obviously have a positive influence on your dive time in the water. Do not hyperventilate. You guys already know this, but I am surprised that so many people don't know this yet. And every time I stumble upon videos on YouTube where people just simply think that freedivers still hyperventilate. Only this week I saw a video from a scuba diving channel where the main man on the channel was saying, he's a scuba diver, was saying that freedivers hyperventilate to exhale as much CO2 as possible so they can hold their breath longer. Nothing can be further from the truth. It is mind-blowing, mind-staggering that people still think that freedivers hyperventilate as a breathe up for freediving. No, you do not do this. Why not? Well, because you already know if you hyperventilate, which means breathing more than you need to. So hyperventilation comes with deeper breathing and also faster breathing. So if you combine deeper breathing with faster breathing, then you have hyperventilation. You are breathing more, and by breathing more, you are exhaling more CO2 than necessary. If you are breathing normal, which is tidal breathing, like this, you barely saw anything because this is light, almost unnoticeable breathing, the most relaxed way of breathing. We are exhaling a little bit of CO2 with every exhalation, but it's minimal, and our body knows how much to exhale, so we keep a healthy level of CO2 in our body. In fact, we need CO2 to distribute the oxygen better in our system. That is right. So that's what a lot of people don't know. Most people consider CO2 as something they have to get rid of, because CO2 is what gives you contractions. CO2 is what gives you the first urge to breathe, and trained freedivers, they know how to deal with this. So trained freedivers, they train how to deal better with CO2. So we call this CO2 tolerance. Trained freedivers are more tolerant to CO2. So when they get their first contraction, they're like, oh, okay, there is the first contraction, no problem. And they go on and on because they are trained to get multiple contractions. But beginner freedivers, they freak out when they feel this urge to breathe. They freak out when they get this first contraction. And there are just many beginner freedivers who cannot go further than the first or the second contraction because it just doesn't feel right. The good news is, guys, that you can train for this, and training doesn't mean that you have to follow like a specific training program. Training means that you just dive. You just dive more and more and more, and the more you dive, the more you get used to this urge to breathe, and then you will understand that CO2 is actually a good thing. You will be able to hold your breath longer if you maintain healthy CO2 levels. If you hyperventilate and you exhale all the CO2 out of you, not only it is dangerous because you do not feel the urge to breathe coming, which means that you can hold your breath indeed a bit longer, but then the blackout, the hypoxia, the extreme low levels of O2, they come without a warning. So the blackout comes without a warning on hyperventilation. I hear people, beginners, sometimes say, yeah, Gert, but I don't push it. That's bullshit, guys. You don't know what it means to push it. You don't know what it means to not go until your limits, because when you hyperventilate, a blackout can happen without any warning at all. When you feel perfectly fine, bang, it can happen. And obviously, when you black out underwater and there is no one to save you, that is the end of your life. So it's not only dangerous, but it also doesn't really benefit you in diving. Now, a little remark on this. There is a mild form of hyperventilation that can be used for static breath holding, and that is called a 5-5 breathe up, 5 seconds inhalation, 5 seconds exhalation. But that is a mild form of hyperventilation. It is certainly not like this, because that is what people think of when they talk about hyperventilation. So this 5-5 breathe up, this mild hyperventilation, can only be used for static breath holding, but not for diving. Why for static breath holding? Because you are not moving. And in this circumstance, when you're not moving, you're just static, you're just laying in the pool or laying on your back, on your bed, on a yoga mat. When you're not moving, it actually helps if the urge to breathe comes a little bit later. But I'm going to say this for a third time now. I want to be very, very clear. This is only for static breath holding. You do not use hyperventilation in any form. I'm getting my earplugs here falling out of my ear. You do not hyperventilate in any form when you're diving. That is deep diving, so vertical or horizontal diving. Then, Okay, what breathe up are we doing if we do not hyperventilate? Well, the answer is very simple. There is no specific breathe up. So we do tidal breathing. We just breathe normally. The way you breathe when you're watching TV, the way you breathe when you're just talking to someone, the way you breathe when you're just sitting somewhere and you're watching the horizon or you're watching the sunset, whatever it is you do, that's how you breathe during a breathe up. Yes. So for beginners, this can be a little bit tricky or challenging because when you do tidal breathing, the definition of tidal breathing is breathing when you're not conscious about breathing. Now, obviously, as a beginner, when I tell you to tidal breathe, you will think about tidal breathing. And when you think about tidal breathing, you will consciously inhale and consciously exhale, and most likely you will already breathe more than tidal breathing. You will already overbreathe just by thinking about breathing. So it's a very contradictory thing not to think about breathing when I'm telling you to do a certain kind of breathing, which is tidal breathing. But once again, the more you do it, the better you get it. And for me, I don't even think about a breathe up anymore. So when people ask me, what breathe up do you do? I'm like, I don't do a breathe up. I just hang on to the buoy and I just relax, I'm just trying to fall asleep. So on my first dive, that feels a bit uncomfortable or a bit weird sometimes, but that is totally normal because this is considered a warm-up. Yeah. So your first dive and your second dive, they are considered a warm-up. I do not think about my first dive as a warm-up. I just dive as if it was whatever dive, as if it was my third or fourth dive. I just don't go as deep. So on my first dive, I go to, I don't know, maybe 10, 50 meters until I start feeling like, okay, now I want to go up. It's not like I'm reaching a limit or something. It's just like, okay, this was good enough. I'm going back up. So there's like zero pressure on me. There's like zero thinking about how I should breathe up. I'm just diving without thinking about anything. That is my first dive, considered a warm-up. And the second dive is the same. I don't think about my breathe up either. I'm just relaxing, holding on to the buoy, and I dive again. And on my second dive, it's a little deeper because now my body and my brain and my lungs and everything is already warmed up a little bit. So now instead of 10, 15, I'm probably going like 20, 25 or something. That would be my second warm-up. And then basically that's enough. That's enough for warm-ups. And then on my third dive, I can, if I want, already do my deepest dive again without paying attention to my breathe up because I don't need to pay attention to it. If you are trained enough, if you are relaxed, then basically there is no breathe up because a breathe up means relaxing. It has got nothing to do with the way you breathe. You just have to pay attention that you're not over breathing. So as beginners, you want to breathe in a certain way. And as you become a more advanced freediver, you will realize that the less you think about how you breathe, the better. And that is exactly tidal breathing. I hope, guys, this makes sense. But at some point in your freediving career, you will understand what this is about. The breathe up is not a breathe up. And that is why some people, some instructors, don't like to use the word breathe up, because when you talk about breathe up, well, the word says it breathe up. You are breathing nothing up. You're just relaxing. All right? Always dive with a buddy. So, you know already, diving with a buddy, never free dive alone. This is a safety thing, of course, but apart from the safety aspect, it has a tremendous influence on the way you dive. Have you ever thought about this? When you dive alone, always in the back of your minds, you're thinking, yeah, I shouldn't go too deep. I shouldn't go pushing my limits, whatever that means, because I do not believe in this expression. I'm not pushing my limits, because it doesn't exist. You don't know what are your limits, and a blackout can also happen under other circumstances. So a blackout is not always the consequence of hypoxia. I mean, you can get tangled up in your lanyards. There might be a problem. Maybe you see a shark and you freak the fuck out and you black out just because you get in a state of panic. So it's not always about pushing the limits or reaching your limits. So basically, when you tell me, yeah, Gert, I know I'm diving alone, I know it's wrong, but I'm not pushing my limits, it's total bullshit, guys. You have to stop doing that. Always dive with a buddy for safety reasons, but also because you are more comfortable when you dive with a buddy. If you dive with a buddy, you know that if something happens, either you become hypoxic or something might happen down there. You never know. You get the cramps, you get tangled up in a line. Once the carabiner of my lanyards got stuck on the line and I couldn't go up anymore. So a safety diver came down and untangled me from this lanyards. This is stuff that can happen. So if you're alone at such a moment, even if your dive was only 5 meters, you can black out, you can die at 1 meter depth, you know? So stuff can happen. You always have to dive with a buddy. If you dive with a buddy, you know you can get rescued. And that has a huge impact on your mental state. I could not do my deepest dives without a buddy. It's impossible. You have to trust in your buddy. You have to know that if you black out, your buddy will save your life. And you know that's not a problem. I mean, obviously we do not want blackouts to happen, but if it happens, you know your life will be saved. And only that will increase your confidence and your relaxation to such a degree that you can dive way deeper and hold your breath way longer than if you would be diving alone. Does that make sense? Another tip, minimize movement. So why can you hold your breath longer during static apnea? Because you don't move. You're just laying down in the water or on a yoga mat, you're not moving. So if you're not moving, you are not using energy. And if you're not using energy, you are not wasting oxygen. So when you move, when you do a lot of movement, you're wasting energy, you're wasting oxygen. Try dancing while holding your breath. I don't think it will take a long time until you start breathing again. So underwater, you're moving, of course. So that is why you cannot hold your breath as long underwater as if you would on static breath holding. So if you minimize the movement underwater, then obviously you're going to hold your breath longer. So how do you minimize your movement? It is by making your technique better. So duck dive has to be near to perfect. Streamlining has to be near to perfect. When you do constant weight with the bifins, your kicking has to be near to perfect. When you do monofin, your monofin technique has to be near to perfect. When you do free immersion, your pullings have to be near to perfect. Your pulls, you get where I'm going to, right? So it's all about technique, guys. The better your technique, the more streamlined, the less movement you are using. Be warm. I touched upon this in the previous video, 12 freediving tips to hold your breath longer underwater. So use a wetsuit. If you dive without a wetsuit, unless the water is like really warm, like in Nemo 33 in Belgium, the water is 32 degrees Celsius, and I'm diving without a wetsuit, and it feels perfectly fine. This is really cool. But yeah, in open water, you never have this. Like in the Philippines, the surface water was 29 degrees, and even there we're using wetsuits, so like 2 millimeters or 1.5 millimeter wetsuits, which are very thin wetsuit, but it's still a noticeable difference. So if you start shivering, if you're cold, then your body starts burning more energy, and when you burn more energy, you burn oxygen, and obviously that oxygen is oxygen that you could use to hold your breath longer. So if you want to hold your breath longer underwater, make sure you're always warm. So use a wetsuit. If you would do like a 2-hour session, even with a wetsuit, by the end of a 2-hour session, you would get cold as well. So don't do 2-hour sessions. If you want to do your deepest dives, if you want to go for a requirement or a personal best, don't wait for 2 hours. Do it when you're still warm. Use the correct weights. Why is this important in holding your breath longer? Well, if you do not use enough weights, then you're going to spend a lot of energy going down on the duck dive, so breaking the surface. So if you do not use enough weights, then you need to exert a lot of energy to go down on the first meters. If you do use if you use too much weight, then you're going down easier, but then when you turn and you come back up, you're going to spend a lot of energy coming up with all that weight, and your minds might not be prepared for this. You may think like, hey, I'm using the correct amount of weights, but when you go up, you're like, oh my God, I'm realizing here that I put on too much weight. And this can be a vicious circle into negativity and eventually cause you to get into a state of panic and maybe black out. So you have to be very conscious about the weights you are using. So always do a buoyancy check at 10 meters. You'd have to be neutrally buoyant at 10 meters. And then last tip, this is basically what freediving is all about. So if you ask me, hey, Gert, how can I hold my breath longer underwater? And I would just tell you, hey, become comfortable. Then I don't think you would be happy with my answer, right? I mean, what kind of instructor, what kind of coach would I be if that was the only thing I could tell you, become comfortable? But everything in freediving comes down to becoming comfortable, because Even equalization, which is looked upon as a technical thing, even equalization gets better when you become comfortable, because equalization heavily depends on CO2 buildup, and CO2 buildup is higher when you're not comfortable. So everything is about becoming more comfortable. And how do you become more comfortable? It is by diving more. I've talked about this already a couple of times in previous videos. I'm not such a fan of doing typical CO2 tables or CO2 tolerance training, or following like a meticulous training program. This is for advanced freedivers, guys. The majority of all freedivers does not need to do this. I mean, you need to train, of course, but do not look upon training as something that has to be written out meticulously. No, training means that you just regularly, on a regular basis, go diving, whether that is in the pool or deep diving. Just dive your kilometers. Before I was a freediver, I was a Latin dancer. Who would have thought that, right? So I followed dance classes, and my dance instructor said, you have to dance your kilometers, or if you're using miles, you have to dance your miles. You have to dance your distance. With diving, it's exactly the same. You have to dive your distance. You have to dive multiple sessions. You have to dive, and become more comfortable. Diving regularly, for me, probably for beginners, because it's been a long time since I was a beginner, of course, but I see this with students, it yields more results than actually following a training program. Because the problem with training programs is that you get all caught up on it, and if you cannot follow the sequence of the training program, then you look upon yourself as a failure. Like today I couldn't do what I was supposed to do. That's complete bullshit. You know, it's detrimental for your mental state. Just dive. Do not follow like real training plans. Just dive regularly. So that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to show your love to this channel, smash the join button.